Hi, I'm Terry Murphy for Realty Times Women in Business, Women in Real Estate, and In the Men's Room with Murph. But today, we have a special woman for women in business. Do you believe that romance actually has a happily ever after? Well, then you need to meet Miss Jennifer Youngblood. She's only written 62 plus books. She probably wrote one while I was giving this introduction. And she is actually a series of writing that is what we call clean romance. And she has a series that's from a Romeo family romance series and more to come. Welcome, Miss Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, before becoming an author, you actually worked as the editor and of a monthly newspaper for seniors, and that kind of started your writing. Is that correct?
Yes. I really enjoyed having the opportunity to do that. And I did write a lot of articles for that. So it was really fun.
It was your beginning. Well, this is in 2004. And so now, growing up in rural Alabama, you had that whole Southern thing kind of working for you, although now you're in Utah in the Rockies. And you said, where everybody knows everybody. And that's kind of good. But your love really began writing these stories when you started high school. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so I grew up in a town of 3,000 people, a place called Stevenson, Alabama. And I had, I think there were 62 people in my graduating class. And so the teachers took a very keen interest in all of us. And my English teacher, who's actually still a very good friend of mine today, we keep in touch. I used to write different stories, and she was kind enough to critique them for me. And she was very encouraging. And that was kind of how I got my start. I say that, but I really have been writing my entire life. It's just something that's in my blood, but that was very encouraging to me, and it's a memory that I cherish.
Well, we all have mentors, and here at Women's Wisdom Network and Women in Business, it's all about women supporting women. So clearly that was a beautiful example of how woman supports women. Now, you said you've been writing forever, which you have, even though you're only like 20, but let's just talk a little bit about your very first book. What was the title?
So the title of that was Living in High Cotton, and it's Livin with an apostrophe over the N. And that one was inspired by the life of my great grandmother. So they lived in Alabama, of course. I started with something that I really knew, and the story takes place right on the eve of the Great Depression. And it takes the main character, her name is Shelby, it takes her through a very pivotal part of her life. And so it's kind of a coming of age. It's a historical romance. And it was nice to kind of fuse fiction with fact. My mom and I wrote this one together. I talked her into writing with me. And so we started out together. And I never knew my great grandmother, but my mother had always talked about her. And then one day I came across some notes that my mom had written, just a single page. And it kind of intrigued me. And I said, I'd like to write this, and I'd like for us to write it together. And so that's how we started.
Another woman supporting women example, and we didn't even plan on that one. Well, here's the thing. You decided, your notes said intensity to character, complexity, inspirational, Christian values, Christian fiction. So you had to make a decision about a direction to write. You could have written about any kind of romance, but you chose clean romance, and like 60 of them, best sellings. I mean, you've got a huge following, which tells me that there is a need or a want or a demand for Christian clean romance novels. Tell us a little bit about how you went that direction. What was your inspiration?
Yes, absolutely. So when I first started writing, I got published through a traditional publisher. And like I said, ironically, Living in High Cotton is the only historical novel that I've written. I went contemporary after that. But I found that when I first started, there really was no clean romance niche. I kind of was the odd man out. I started networking with a few authors that lived in the little small town where I lived, and we would go to library events. And I realized right away that my writing was very different from their writing.
And specifically, not using words that aren't appropriate.
Not using words that are appropriate, that are inappropriate. Also, just mine are infused with Christian values. But they're not necessarily what you would call like any particular religion. And so I almost didn't fit in because I am a little bit different religion than other people in the South. And so I thought,
You think, having moved to the South, I found out I was the only Catholic anywhere.
yes, I can relate, Terry. I can relate. And so I really felt like I didn't fit in anywhere because people, I mean, one time I talked to an agent, a New York agent, and they say if you can actually get an agent to call you, you've made it, right? And so
Exactly.
I was thrilled because, an agent called me. We had a great conversation. He was interested in my second novel that it was called, it was Stony Creek, Alabama. And he was very interested in it. And we talked, and then he said, okay, I can't wait to read it. And it was almost one of those things to where we were ready to seal the deal, right? And then a few days later, I was really disappointed when I just got this generic rejection letter, and so I wrote him back and I said, you were so excited. I don't understand what happened. And he said, well, I was looking for the next Desperate Housewives. And I think because he thought I was Southern, that he assumed that my romance would be racy, and it's not.
Okay.
Um, I, and so for a little while, I kind of felt like I was a misfit, and then fast forward, oh gosh, probably 10 years, and then I was able to be talking about women helping women. I was able to network with a group of other women who are just like me, and we write the same type of genre. And so we were able to then and the independent publishing wave came around this time too. So when I first started, it was looked on negatively. Anyone who
Oh, yes.
didn't get published through a
Self-published, right? Self-publishing didn't really look professional. It didn't have graphics, didn't have an ISBN number. I mean, for those people that write. And clearly it didn't stop you, but you were still publishing somehow, right? In that 10 years?
Well, so I was fortunate to be able to get picked up by a traditional publisher. So living in High Cotton and Stony Creek, Alabama, both of those were through a traditional press. And I had another mentor who was a seasoned book critic. And we just happened to live in the same area in Texas and went to church together. And when I first told her that I was writing, she said, I'd be interested in reading what you've written. And she said, did you start out writing short stories and morph into writing? And I said, no, just wrote a novel. Just thought I'd start with that. And she kind of laughed and she said, well, send me what you've written. So I did. I printed it out, and back then it was, this thick because you're doing double space, right? So
Right.
taking this mammoth manuscript and I dropped it on her doorstep. And she said, it may take me a few weeks to get to it. And so anyway, so her name is Karen. So I had dropped it off on a Friday and no one was home. And of course, like every new author, I thought that I had written the great American novel and I did not want anyone to steal it. I laugh now because, I understand. I mean, that's how I felt. But so I called her on a Monday and I said, Karen, did you get the manuscript? And she said, I did. And I said, oh, good. Well, just let me know when you've had a chance to read it. And she said, I read it. And I said, you did? And she said, I read it yesterday. I had some extra time. And I said, what did you think? And she just proceeded to rip it apart. And that was my first.
That always feels so good, especially when it's your baby.
You just feel like you're just being just like ripped apart, chewed up and spit out. And that's kind of how it was. And then, so I go back, my tail between my legs to pick it up. And her husband was the only one home. And I said, I guess Karen didn't like my book. And he said, oh, she loved it. I said, wow, she loved it. He said, oh yeah, she just wants you to be better. And so I took her advice and I think we cut I don't know how many thousand words out of the manuscript and strengthened a few things. And so then I started submitting, just submitting to random. Back then, you kind of just went, they had a publishers week. You probably know this, Terry,
Right.
but this big, huge book that would tell all the publishers that publish different things. And so anyway, I ended up feeling good about this one. So I submitted it. Well, then I got an email from them that said, we think we may be interested in your manuscript. And so I immediately called Karen and I said, hey, this publisher says they may be interested in my manuscript. And I said, what do I do? If they make me an offer, what do I do? And she said, well, you take it. She said, you realize that less than 0.5% of the people who submit get accepted? She said, so you take it. So I did. And so they published our first two. And so that's how we started. And then my husband, who's marketing is in his DNA. That's what he does. And he kept saying, you're working yourself really hard. We would go to events all around the country. We would use our own money to do it. And we were actually through I guess what would be considered a mid-size publisher, small to mid-size. And so, of course, our book had zero budget. And so we spent the money ourselves and marketed it. And then I had another writing friend who sat me down one day and said, okay, let's look at what you would have made versus, if you'd done this yourself. But I just wasn't ready to do that because writing is one thing, having your own business is another thing.
Well, most writers are artistic in their style, and the business part of it requires a whole different kind of mindset and skill set. And that's one of the big issues with people who want to write a book, which we're going to talk about in a second. So you obviously went to independent publishing, which gives you way more flexibility.
I did, and I don't think things are by accident. I attribute it to a blessing. I really do. And that I was put with this group of women at the same time in the same place. And we kind of crafted out our niche together. And now it's a huge niche. And I'm not presumptuous to say that, a lot of them laugh and say we started it, but I don't know that that's the case. There are many wonderful writers and many wonderful clean romance writers, but I'm glad that we were a part of it.
You might have started the community, which attracted more people, which is about what Women's Wisdom Network is all about, is bringing opportunities, insights, experiential relational capital to help women. In this case, a lot of people want to write a book. Now, how long does it take you to write a book?
Well, so now I write, people ask, what do you write? I say, well, think of Hallmark. I write that, but then my characters, I feel like do have a lot of complexity, and I love suspense. So every time I will put suspense in there. So that's how I describe my writing. And my first book took 3 years to write. My boys were young at the time. I was homeschooling them for a short stretch. And so it just took a while. And then our second one, I think it took a year. And I thought, oh, wow, we're making great progress, right? Now it takes an average of 2 to 3 weeks.
So this is so interesting because depending on the book, of course, obviously you have refined the platform. Do you have a system that you use? Is there a special room you go to? Is there a time blocking mechanism you use? Because I can hear a number of women speaking to me going, well, that must be fine, but I've got a full-time job and I've got this. I'd love to write a book. Just give us a little bit about an insight to your discipline or your process for getting in the zone to write.
Well, what I do is I'm actually very regimented. The first few books I wrote, I just kind of what's called a pantser. I just sat down and just wrote them. And then it took a lot of revision on the back end. And so as I've developed into this, I've realized that I need a system. And so now what I do is I'm very detailed in my synopsis. So when I start crafting a book, I research. I love research. And so I research it, I put in everything, and I basically put it all in this one document that's my synopsis. And without fail, I'll usually know pretty detailed, like my detail is very finite at the beginning of the novel. I'll know exactly what I need to do, so I'll fill that all in. But then it'll be a little sketchy at the end. I'm not quite sure yet what I want to happen at the end. And so with that, I start. And I write anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day, just depending on my schedule. And yes, I do have a certain place that I write. I have 2 offices. I have an office where I do all of my business work to run the business. And that's more of like a regular home office with a desk and, a desktop computer. And then my office that I call my office where I live is my basement. And my husband laughs because he got me together this wonderful office, but I have claimed the basement. And that's my happy spot because it's cool. No one bothers me and I can't hear the doorbell.
I've been down there virtually. I know it's very comfortable, lest anybody's thinking you're down there with some old Christmas decorations. So Jennifer, tell us, why would someone want to read your books? What's your intention for the journey of that reader of a clean romance style book? if I was new, tell us about your reader community.
So I think that my readers definitely want to be entertained. They want the feeling of falling in love. Romance is the only genre where you really know what's going to happen, right? Before you read the book, kind of. You kind of know they're going to get together, right? But you don't know what their happily ever after will be, or what their particular brand of happiness is. And so people who read my books, I think they're people who have good Christian values, people who want to be uplifted. I get a lot of messages from people that say, thank you. You know, this is something that not only can I read, but my children and my grandchildren can read. And that means a lot to me. And it's a hard balance sometimes. I think a lot of authors that write clean romance will call it sweet romance. You know, you hear sweet and spicy because we don't want to offend any writer of anything, and that's not my intent at all. And I hate for people to think because I'm clean that I'm saying that somebody else's writing is not good. I'm just saying that for me and the readers who read my books, we appreciate good Christian values.
And that just makes sense. I mean, that's an analogy in television would be Hallmark. We all know they're going to meet, they're going to have a slight disagreement, they're going to kiss, it's over. And the journey's wonderful 100 times. I mean, 100 times, because it's just pleasant. And I think especially today, people are looking for entertainment, especially if it's positive. So, you know, your success really speaks for itself. I mean, 60 plus books, 2 adorable sons, one of whom I know well, beautiful family. You know, you've got the world right here. You've got over 250,000 people that enjoy your blog, your posts, being in your community. How would people find out about you? How would they order your books? How would they join your social groups? Give us a way to get back to Jennifer Youngblood.
Well, I tell people a great way to start. I have a website, and it's jenniferyoungblood.com. And on that website, there will be a link where you can join my newsletter list. And when you join my newsletter list as a special welcome gift, I give away a free book. And so that's a great way to start.
People like presents. Getting a free book is always a nice present. And that gives everybody a chance to really buy it, to try it. Would you agree?
I think so. That's absolutely. And what I do is in my newsletter, I do send out routinely 6 newsletters a week. I don't do Sunday, and occasionally I'll miss a day. But at first, I started out, sending it once a week or twice a week, and then I soon learned that my readers wanted more. They want good uplifting romance, and so they love recommendations. So I'll recommend other authors, the caveat being that they're clean and uplifting. And so but that's a great way. I also have a Facebook page. It's author Jennifer Youngblood, and I have an Instagram page also. I think maybe is there a way to put links to those things? Maybe
you know what? I'm sure I can talk to our team because they're awesome. But if nothing else, the article will have all those links. So it's jenniferyoungblood.com.
Yes.
Author Jennifer Youngblood on Facebook and on Instagram. And, I have to say that we're grateful. I mean, there are so many women that get a little respite, a little joy, a little fun, a little comfort from reading your books for pleasure. I'm hoping you'll join us again at some, because obviously, but by after lunch, you'll probably have another book. But I really appreciate your joining us.
I wish.
But I hope you'll join us again as you keep writing, because this is so interesting. And if somebody was listening, just as a quick close, to be an aspiring writer, what would you say?
I tell people that just write. I tell them to turn the critic off and just write.
That mean girl's got to go she's got to go into timeout, doesn't she? Because that's the one thing about Women's Wisdom Network we don't allow, and that is it has to be a totally supportive, safe place for us to be our best selves. So thank you for joining us. I hope you'll join the Women's Wisdom Network Facebook group. It's a private group on Facebook so that we can share more of your newsletters and your information. I'm Terry Murphy. Thanks for joining us today for Women in Business on Realty Times Women in Business.